Well, colleagues, one more speaker that we were waiting for finally got through the identification procedure. Now we're all here. Good day, good afternoon, all of you. I'm happy to welcome each participant, and I hope that within this short period of time allocated to us for this session, we will be able to satisfy yours and our interests, and we will manage to discuss very relevant subject, which is remote identification. We will be talking about available methods to make remote identification, whether they're accessible to the customers, to the financial institutions. And also we will discuss those issues that we need to tackle to promote the remote identification further. And I will be helped today by our distinguished speakers, representatives of the regulator, as well as representatives of the business communities, and they are locomotives, as we heard, in the progress of digitalization of all financial services. I fully agree with it. Herman Neglyad, State Secretary, Deputy Director of the Federal Service on Financial Monitoring, Rosfinmonitoring, Dmitry Dubynin, and Department Director and Digital Identification Department, Ministry of Digital Development, Mass Media and Communication, Minцифры Russia, as we call it, and Vladislav Povolotsky, Director General of the Center of Biometric Technologies. It's the company which is established recently, and it is very relevant to the subject, to the possible remote identification. Bogdan Ababkov, Director General, Incident Center. Stanislav Bliznyuk. He is a chairman of the board, Tinkoff Bank, and Pyatkov, as the director of retail business, Alfa-Bank. Before I ask a question to my distinguished speakers, I want you to ask a question which will be displayed on the screen. Just take out your cell phones and take the Finapolis application, log in and see this question and the possible options that you need to choose. It's a very simple question. Which identification method at the account creation in the bank is the most preferred? 4 options. You need to choose one option. And option 1, personal visit. Option 2, personal meeting with a bank representative. Option 3, remote identification and using MBC. And it's obvious the demand for remote identification using advanced technology is there, both from the customer's perspective as well as from the financial institutions. Our banking sector, as we've heard today, is a locomotive. And some believe they are big tech. They're acting as big tech in our economy. Yes, indeed, the level of digital development of our services is really high. But remote identification, we are still struggling with it. We cannot tackle it so fast as we want to and as it probably required. The main law that enshrines the rules for personal identification, it's a well-known law, 11.5FZ law. It prescribes the mandatory rules. You need to personally show up to the bank for personal identification. But we have an international organization for it, and you probably reading on the news. You know what kind of organization is this, and this is the organization that deals with AML rules to combat AML. We are part of this organization. We follow its principles, and these principles, they do not prescribe a strict rule of personal visit. And is it possible to amend our law 115, which is more cautious, more conservative law? And what needs to be done to avoid additional risks? We've been discussing it with our colleagues from Rosfinmonitoring, and that's why the first question goes to Herman Neglyad. And you need to come personally to the branch, to the office. You need to show your passport and your face to undergo the identification procedure. But in many countries of the world that comply with FAT rules, there is an option of remote video identification. Herman Yurievich, what is your perspective on use of video identification by our financial institutions? Are you ready to discuss the amendment to the law 115FZ to use the video connection for the customer's identification? And there is an opinion that it will even prompt fraud prevention. When customers receive a card and they give it away to the third parties, we call it drops. And unfortunately, nowadays they are present in the banking sector and they promote the fraud. And if you remember these questions, please give us your perspective. Good day, distinguished colleagues. Can you hear me properly? Thank you for the opportunity to take part in this discussion. If I can answer in brief, yes, we do have prospects. Yes, we need and shall discuss it, the remote identification, now in more detail. Let us start with the concept, with the definition. What is our expectation from this remote identification? We have international standards and the law 115FZ, and it's very simple. Point one, we need to establish the personal data, the data on a specific individual, verify authenticity of this data using independent sources of information. In this way, the title, the name of our panel, I see you, I know you, it's a right wording for our panel. First, I see you, step one, and step two, I verified, then I know. We are thankful to the Bank of Russia and all the people who are interested in for the very right wording for this session. We need to identify the personal data and then verify, confirm. Indeed, neither in the standards nor in the law 115, it's more conservative law. Nowhere you can find that there is a requirement of personal presence, personal visit, but one way or another. But the financial market developed in such a way that the main method of such identification historically, the personal visit established. And I can disagree a little bit with Olga that we have nothing apart from the personal visit. Starting from 2013, the law is under amendment, and first in 2014, amendments took effect on the simplified identification in remote mode for some types of transactions with certain thresholds, and a little bit later, the biometric identification was introduced. And this is a classical type of remote identification, which is fully compliant with all international standards when data first is received and then verified using an independent system. In this case, we use EBS, single banking system data. We have a certain history already, and in our regulatory framework, we have a background to it. As far as the further development is concerned, we can discuss the video identification, and let me quote the international standards, refer to the international standards. We had a quite interesting document, which is called the Guidelines on Digital Personal Identification, issued in 2020. And it says that any remote identification shall be based on risk evaluation pertaining to the specific product. Any increased, any elevated risks of remote identification need to be compensated by the technological and regulatory solutions. First of all, and in particular, it says the use of independent information systems. Let me get back to the biometric identification. This is a classical way to use such systems. Video identification, as far as it is concerned, and countries already gained, accumulated certain experience in this area. As a rule, these legal and technological compensatory measures boil down to the following. The trained personnel, point one. We need to have the personnel which is specifically trained for such kind of identification. Certain requirements, technological requirements to the video session, duration of such a session, quality of connection, certain actions that need to be performed by a customer, questions asked by the algorithm, and the customer needs to answer these questions to avoid deepfakes, use of deepfakes. Recording of such video session and storage of these video materials. We have colleagues from the banking community, and it's really interesting to get to know what is the estimates on financial investments. Are they ready to store such video materials? According to the law 115, such material shall be stored at least for 5 years after termination of relationships with the customer. And we have one more requirement associated with the data storage. If we follow this path, this is the opportunity to establish such a session upon request or give it to the authorities, to the competent authorities. In the guidelines issued by FATF, it says remote identification can providing if we mitigate certain risks, it will improve financial accessibility, including the categories of our population who do not have a chance to use other service channels. To sum up the above, let me put it this way. From our perspective, remote identification need and shall be discussed, but we prefer to begin with a pilot project at a certain limited number of customers, maybe organizations, entities, to see how it works. We already gained a good experience of the experimental legal regime and the digital ruble pilot project, for example. It's running, and then to come to a final conclusion on technological, regulatory, and legal parameters associated with this new type of identification, which is a remote one. Thank you, Herman Yurievich. It's a very constructive stance from my perspective. And in your speech, you mentioned certain parameters of this logical control and requirements towards this logical control that might put a foundation for amendment of our legislation and regulatory acts. I believe we've heard, all of us heard that we shall and should move into this direction once the regulators tell us such things. This is not just instills hope in us. This is something that means that we are ready to walk. And Central Bank of Russia is giving us the guidelines for the financial market development. This is a free document. We upgrade this document annually. Very recently, while we discussed the next version of this document that we will present to the community shortly, one of such areas is development of remote identification. Yes, we might run a pilot project in experimental mode. We shall not postpone it for long. We need to jumpstart discussing it. Right now, I would like to ask the representatives of the Ministry of Digital Development, the former employee of the Central Bank, who is supposed to be interested in development of digitalization of financial services and enable our banking sector to speed up and gain momentum in this area. What do we observe? In the modern environment of digital economy, we are gradually creating so-called our own digital customers profile, and we're really concerned with the comfort, accessibility, and we are concerned with safety as well. What is going to happen with this digital profile, with our data? And today, one of the key solutions on this path, which was mentioned by Herman Yurievich, is biometric identification. Biometry. What is the major benefit pertaining to biometric identification? And let me answer instead of you. We cannot lose it. We cannot leave it behind our face. And as far as I know, biometry uses our face features, and it's difficult to counterfeit. Again, who knows? Neural networks can do almost everything. And in Russia, the application of biometric data to identify individuals in the focus of everybody's attention, starting from 2018, our banks are joining one single biometric system the end of last year. The law 572 FZ was passed. It was quite quiet enactment of this law, and our time to put it into effect is coming. But this law prescribes collection, processing, and storage of all data related to customer identification and authentication and biometric. First of all, I mean, Dmitry, from your perspective, what are the other grounds why the biometric identification is so much in demand? What are the benefits, maybe the issues pertaining to this process? And what is your perspective on the opportunity to implement video identification using biometric data? What got changed for the ordinary people as the law 572 was passed, and what changed for the organizations using biometric identification in their operation? And what is the capacity, extra capacity of this biometric system? Maybe we have risks and limitations that still persist. Thank you very much, Olga, and distinguished colleagues. Let me welcome all of you. I should say, first of all, that from 2018, when we launched one single biometric system, all of us remember it was accompanied, supervised by the Central Bank together with the Ministry of Digital Development. It was a colossal amount of work. The market started to collect biometric data, and every year, traditionally, the law was amended, timelines were shifted, requirements were modified, and the last version of this law, which is available now, that emerged 1 year ago, it turned out to be not just about one single biometric system, but about the regulatory actions in terms of biometric data processing. And the law 572 really clarified the way to manage it and created rules for the market. We've got commercial biometric systems and the Institute for Accreditation. We've got state-owned biometric systems and processes. And now we are discussing the matters related to responsibility, who is responsible party. And we have a draft law in terms of the most sensitive personal data, which is biometric data. And it was important to do because once we realized that biometric data is gathered for a long time, it happened not yesterday and even not 10 years ago, but significantly earlier. And we realized that the major challenge is that any one of us already gave out the biometric data, fitness center, bank, organization. Today, even today, we are using biometric identification to come to Phinopolis. Anyone. Once we enter the store, they give us a loyalty card. Someone gives false data, receive this card, and somebody leaves true data. And forget about safety of data. And when I had a discussion in the State Duma, remember, they discussed the matter that the citizen is not always conscious where his or her personal data is, not mentioning biometric data. And the passion and the level of discussion become really high. And the citizen started to say that the state collects our biometric data, and we tried to clarify that we are doing quite opposite, and we are trying to ensure all this biometric data is kept in the trusted vault. Previously, if we could have multiple repositories of biometric data, now we realize all biometric data will be kept in one single system, and we developed compliance procedures to be followed. We developed conditions for the companies that can use derivative data from this biometric and provide services. We separated it into identification and authentication. We divided the constituents of the market who are eligible to make certain operations. It was important to do, as you rightly said, to explain the citizens the goal, why we're doing it.
And so the goal is very simple. We just wanted to introduce some order into the market, and we wanted to make it safer for our citizens so that they wouldn't be losing their data, to prevent some leaks. And based on this foundation, we could establish our relationships with the market. And so as of now, we have an authorized organizations. Those are banks, and this is not weird at all, because banks are always the pioneers. And we have some specificity in this country that banks in Russia are the most tech advanced organizations, and it is being confirmed all the time, and so the banks are the pioneers here. And so the important process that is undergoing now and is not finished yet is the transfer of biometric data that was assembled by the banks in the past to the unified biometric system. And I think that Vladislav will talk about it in more detail today. The process is undergoing, and the banks are still getting the certification to do this. But now what's new is that we got the rules of the game, and it allows us to have the unified biometric system with all the services that it can provide on the one hand. And on the other hand, banks that were already using the biometric data, they will continue to enjoy this just under the new conditions. And the new reason why we introduced all this is because we wanted to set the right requirements towards the environment where this data is being processed. In the past, we did understand that we have a heavy, safe biometric system with some number of samples, and there were immense requirements when it comes to the safety and security. And when, for example, we have some medical center and biometric data there is mixed with all the other data, that's not the way it should be working. And so our goal was to prevent these situations in the future. As to the future itself, as it was rightfully stated, we've created the Center of Biometric Technologies, and the Bank of Russia is one of the shareholders of this company. This is a state-owned company. And so in accordance with the goals stipulated by the order of the President for the Center of Biometric Technologies, we will continue to develop this process, and we'll also stimulate the commercial biometric systems in the market. Now, this is quite a large work also for the unified biometric system, because different companies have different solutions, and the unified biometric system should support them as well. And so that's what we are working on. When it comes to video identification, after everything I've already mentioned, I need to underline the following. We are never against discussing something. I remember the case where we had marketplace that were coming to us with this. but they're not working on it anymore. And I do remember that it was during the COVID times when there were some restrictions on personal visits. And in this case, I believe it's very important to set the goal, to decide what do we actually want to do in the end. So the Minister of Digital Development has a concept of identification, banking identification. We do trust banking identification. It's a high-quality process that is done by highly skilled professionals, and these people are responsible for this. That's why we can confirm our account on the state services via some bank services. It is a trusted system, and we, the Ministry of Digital Development, we see it, the confirmation online via this system as the personal visit. And in 2018, we got a biometric system. And so people got an opportunity actually to get identified remotely, to get a loan from a bank. And so we've been involved in this process together, so we do understand how biometric identification works. But when it comes to video identification, it's not criticism from my side, but I'm just ruminating on this. So if there is a process and there are some requirements that are not existent or they're lower than some other ones, or sometimes there could be some requirements, and with these requirements, you can open some specific bank account with some limitations, and then like only this account can be opened and not another one. So I do support this story because we could overview the process as it is, and I guess that the requirements could be elaborated on. Because when we talk about communication via video channel, we demonstrate some documents on video. And here we face the process of document authentication. And well, I'm a professional in authentication, for example, and I have a lot of projects in this area. And I do understand that if we have a document with some electronic chip, then I can identify it remotely. For example, in foreign passport, like international passport for Russian citizens with the chips, right? So this works. But when it comes to just hard copy document, we need to assess all the risks. Maybe a photo can be replaced, deepfake can be used, and there are many other options. So there are multiple questions that we need to review and analyze. And here we face one large risk, in my opinion. This experiment can result in a conclusion that actually we need to build another biometric system. Because during this experiment, we can face a situation when the risks that exist while somebody is receiving the service, those risks are too high in proportion to the value that we get. And so it could happen that in the end, we will need to just come to quite a classical biometric system when there is some benchmark that was supplied via the trusted channel, and then we compare data with this biometric benchmark. I don't say that it's going to happen for sure, but it's a possible scenario. So we are ready to participate in a video identification experiment if it's going to happen, but we do have our own concerns, and I had to voice them today. When it comes to the opportunities of application of the video identification, well, we just need to experiment. Okay, thank you very much, Dmitry, for your extensive reply. And I do agree with you that any tech innovations should be tested against some consequences and risks. It's indeed very important. It's very important for us to develop all the new technologies and give opportunities to get services in a comfortable way, but without creating any additional risks for banking systems. I am sure that banks are interested in that as well, and they'll be talking about it today. As to the unified biometric system, indeed, it's quite an important step, and the changes introduced by the law that was issued last year. I actually read those 44 pages of this new law yesterday. I recommend everybody to read it as well. And there are also a lot of bylaws. Right, that's correct. Well, I've read it very fast, but I got an impression. And here I would like to comment as follows. Well, indeed, biometric data is now being very actively introduced to our life. You're absolutely right saying that sometimes we don't even realize that we are submitting our data. Just recently, I've traveled from another country, and I had to actually look in the camera, right? Well, I couldn't say, no, I don't want to look in the camera. I couldn't say that I don't want to submit my biometric data. So what's quite also important, of course, it's very important to be financially literate, but it's also very important to explain to our people why it's not dangerous, why it's not damaging to submit biometric data. Because now it seems to me that our citizens are quite cautious, and the law that's just been published, it actually grants the right to a person to deny the collection or refuse the collection of their personal data. So as a suggestion, I think that we also need to think about how to explain to the citizens how it actually works. Now I'd like to give the floor to Vladislav, the head of the board of the Center of Biometric Technologies. One of the main shareholders of this center is the Bank of Russia. So, Vladislav, the unified biometric system. Over the last year, it was transformed a lot. So we had some legal amendments, those that are setting some requirements towards the collection of biometric data. So what's new are we going to have? Could you share the list of services of the unified biometric system, and what are the advantages that the business will get, and whether it will get it at all with this new biometric services? Yes. Olga, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. So, in fact, if we take a look at the previous year, then 1 year ago we were focusing on what's going to happen, what will be there for us, and how it will change our reality. But today we are ready, and we'll discuss it a lot on the sidelines. We'll discuss a lot what has happened, how it influences the market, the industry, and what's going to happen in the future. So to continue in what you've already said, I think this year, on top of some regulation amendments and establishing new niches, we also focused on a couple of things. First, simplification of the process and building habit. So this year, I believe one of the most important thing is the simplification of the collection. So in March, we launched a mobile application which is called the State Services Biometric. And so with the foreign passport, one could submit the biometric data of their voice and picture. And on the 20th of October, we launched a simplified biometric system. For this, to use this, you only need to have the confirmed account on the State Services platform. And so the statistics shows us that the simpler the process, the easier the habit will be built. And so now, starting from the 20th of October, we are recording not less than 1,000 submissions of biometric data per day, and that's quite a good result. So now we are finalizing the process when it comes to the regulation. And on top of the simplification and building the habits, we also wanted to make this process seamless. And so Dmitry didn't really elaborate on that today, but multiple companies, and most of them from the financial market were ready for this. So most of the companies are transferring their clients to this system in a seamless manner. And so this is also quite a result for us this year. So they're importing the biometric data, they are collecting consents, and then they provide the services based on this new system. And so for this biometric system, we took the low risks operations. And so what we do every day, for example, we pay, right? And so on this forum, it's the first time that we show the technology of acquiring. This is a joint project with the National Payment System MIR, based on the our fast payment system. So everybody here pays and moves, and so we also invest a lot in transportation. We also focus on security a lot and safety, etc. So we also thought about the simplicity, about the seamless process, and the third important stage for us was the ability to manage the system. And so the norms that allowed us to make this system managed, these are the norms that will be valid starting from the 1st of January 2024. So now everybody can see the biometric data, where it was collected, when, and also a person can delete these data. So these are very clear rules in the market, and that means that some large players can participate in that, as well as some small companies, such companies that work with the access data. For example, we also had the access procedure when we entered this forum. And so starting from the 1st of June of this year, when people got this opportunity to refuse to have their biometric data collected, actually we see the a second part of these people who are interested. So people are interested in this. It might be strange, but we see people who actually don't want to have their biometric data collected. So they refused to do this, but they still try to submit this data. And so it's interesting. You've also raised this question. It's about understanding. And this year we worked a lot with the students. We worked with young people, those who in fact see the world differently. The world is more open to them. It's simpler. From the very childhood, they have a face ID, touch ID, and these young people aren't afraid of this. And so we just enforced all of this with safety and security. Today we also talked about deepfakes and detecting of deepfakes. We already signed contracts with the key companies in this respect. And so talking about the topic of today, about video identification, I would like to mention the following. Where is the borderline between video identification and remote biometric identification? Well, this is the question to you, actually. That's right. So we have experience in dealing with these cases. These are in the area of education. So, for example, remote examination. We had such cases in 7 universities. And indeed, one of the questions there is, during the video flow, we could identify the person in a moment, in a live manner. And then we face some collisions, legal ones and some other ones. Where is the identification and where is the authentication? So when a person, for example, could have been replaced, or where he could move somewhere else. So there are some questions, but at the same time, it's very convenient. Second case are court hearings. Also, we discussed it quite a lot with the Supreme Court, and we can plan to continue discussing it and introducing it to practice. This is about the remote identification. We have a large country, and in different parts of our country, there are court hearings, and it consumes a lot of resources, especially when one needs to travel from point A to point B. And so we do understand that the remote identification can be indeed integrated with video identification. And here, one needs to think about where is this borderline? How can we develop both parts and also not violate any rules? Because, well, biometric identification is more about those people who don't really like to communicate and prefer to do something remotely. But we also have some other people, like extroverts, right? And for most of the people, communication is very important, and this is more about video identification. And so we need to understand how much in demand the video identification is. And we also need to understand whether we identify the identity or personality. To sum up, well, as to the future, well, we are focusing more on the frequently used services such as payments, transportation, some visits to some public bodies, visits to any events, to gyms, sports facilities, etc. So everything that we use quite often, our task is to make those services safe, secure, simple, and transparent. So we have nothing to hide. Vladislav, thank you very much. I believe that you are right to the point with your question. So where is this borderline between video identification and remote identification? And so this is the task for all of us for the future. For us, when we start to move into, I hope that we'll be moving into that direction. Bogdan, now the question goes to you. Your company is actively researching and studying the international experience in the field of identification and authentication. So you've familiarized yourselves with the practice around the world. Well, maybe not around the whole world, but you probably got some cases seen in Europe and in America when it comes to identification and authentication. So proceeding from your professional experience, which of the contemporary models and platforms of digital identification or authentication is acceptable, and which are the most efficient for Russia?
What are the criteria to evaluate these platforms? Are there any mature domestic solutions, Russian software that can ensure technological sovereignty? Is there any competition, or there is a monopoly state in this sector? One more question to you. Our topic is AI for the entire Phenopolis. What is the benefit associated with AI in the process of video identification? It's a large-scale question indeed. Thank you for inviting me, first of all, and I'm happy to share my own perspective with you on the subject. I counted 16 ventilation ducts in this audience, so everything is safe. So the biometric data is a complex concept. I'm from a technological company, and I can clearly say that biometric data for the technician is different from what other people think. And all of us, we have mobile phones. We have iPhones, Apple, and with the iOS software wind, we have Android-based smartphones, and professional community believes that Apple has a true biometric system because they photograph your face. The face is stored in the protected chip, which is kept in the local terminal device, and there is an infrared sensor that is engaged in the identification process. It's more complex, and professional community respects it, and the credit organization, they trust that the iPhone can be trusted, and they allow to be authorized using this biometric data inside your mobile device. This is one aspect. And in case of Android phone, I don't want to offend anyone. I carry Android phone myself, but biometric solutions is simpler. They just photograph your face and neural networks are processing it, no additional factors. And as a rule, the credit organization Usually, at least Tinkoff and Alfa-Bank, they do not recognize it. They ask for a finger print. At least my mobile phone requires a fingerprint on top of the face. And we have simple options of biometric solutions. The fingerprint has been in use for millions of years. It emerged in the criminal science because the fingerprints are taken at the criminal scene. It was there and it will be. It is applied in the cross-border procedures. So next time, if something happens to respond to the cross-border threats, there are overly complex systems like innovative solutions like the gate sensor. Each one of us has a unique gate, and these biometric systems are super complex. If you want me to answer the question, what is more preferred and used at the market, this is video biometric data. It needs to be what is video? What it stands for? It's high frequency of photographs, 30, 60 photographs per second. This is what video stands for. They photograph your face in different status, and biometric data allows to use such a biometric parameter as your voice. It's on top, and plus video biometric allows to single out to extract one frame from the video and get a metadata to use it and send them to some other information system for verification, to check whether such an ID document is present in some other state-owned identification system. This is how technically it works. And we have two paradigms for video identification. Paradigm 1, video identification is used just as a means of communication between an operator who makes these verification checks with a potential customer who wants to be onboarded. And this is used a lot in Austria, Germany, Israel, Lithuania, Estonia, rather advanced countries in Israel. From the technology perspective, everything is at the highest level in Israel. From my point of view, it's not really good solution because on the other side there is a human being, and a human being can be subjective. And it's not 100% biometric data. Previously, it was face-to-face, and now this is a video conference as a channel, access channel. So one person connects with another person. From my perspective, this is not effective. As our experience tells, the analysts of different solutions, we research international vendors of payment systems, and we study the crypto exchanges, different times of loan organizations, credit organizations. Most of the agencies and companies, they follow the fully autonomous video identification solution in the form of neural networks. Let me mention United States, Switzerland, Australia, Hong Kong, Canada, and a whole lot of other countries. Why I believe this is the most optimum solution for us. A simple example for you. I shared this example before. This is not a brand new. This is my own personal example. And I lived in the Far East some time ago. As any citizen of the Far East, I visited China a lot. And we had one case at the borderline. And we were friends with two girls, blonde girls, and we were approached by the state security officer, high-ranking customs official. He approached us and tried to explain to us, took the passports and he swapped them, swapped the passports. This is just a mock inspection, mock training. We got really concerned. We didn't have an option to refuse, and we were passing the border and we realized how it works. Once we approached the borderline custom service, and this guy, he passed the attestation exams at the border, And the task for him was to figure out what has happened. And for the Chinese representative, ordinary Chinese customs border, to distinguish two not similar but white-haired, blonde young ladies, it's a problem. It's like for Europeans to distinguish two Chinese people. So it works the other way around as well. And identification through an operator is not always objective, sometimes regional specificities. But in this case, this is just a channel for the personal meeting. And solution, as international practices dictates, it needs to be fully automated. Of course, human intervention shall be there, but as a supervisory authority that investigates some of the cases that stand out, that outlined, and this is like a front monitoring service that is dealing with abnormal cases. But use of video identification is a good fit for us. It suits us because it is applied across the globe and it is used in other countries. And it's a kind of mechanical. It will, if we have it, it will be our competitive advantage. It will enable us to broaden our horizons. Not horizons, but the space for maneuver. And our fintech will develop more intensely afterwards. And maybe my colleagues can correct me, colleague from Tinkoff Bank can correct me if I'm wrong. Back then, you invented a wonderful approach to identification. A courier comes and identifies you on the spot, on the ground. It changed the rules at the market, the way identification needs to be done, and customer service to be organized. It was a game changer. And if you could have a chance to have a video identification, you would never use this approach. Probably I will wrap up, and time is running for us. Thank you very much, Bogdan. You asked a question to Stanislav already, but I am a moderator. I am entitled to ask my own question. We reached our locomotives, and I fully agree with this point. And we have representatives of two leading banks of Russia, and they are trendsetters in the development of digitalization of financial services. Tinkoff is one of the first banks in Russia that started to operate online, to provide services online. And we witnessed the explosive growth of this bank. And Tinkoff, we really got enticed by expeditious human centricity that Tinkoff demonstrated. And I believe it will be like that in the future as well. Stanislav, please tell me, what are the technological remote identification solutions you managed to implement, if apart from the couriers who come and identify customers and give away bank cards? Maybe you have technologically advanced solutions. Have you managed to minimize the risks of fraud, which is important nowadays? And what is your perspective on biometry, video identification, and all these things that we're discussing today? Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to hear that financial market is a driver for identification services. And I would like to explain why. The banks, they love their customers because we have healthy competition, and we are thankful to the regulator. And each bank is trying to satisfy a customer as much as possible to keep loyalty. And banks love good customers, but banks do not love the fraudsters. And that's why and the good customer brings you 100 rubles, and bad customer can steal 100,000 rubles. And we need to get rid out of them. And that's why this is a driver. And we were the first ones who launched courier representatives. It was a long time ago. And we launched it to satisfy the law 115 requirements. An interesting thing happened. We meet people, seems to be, we check their passports, and then we realize There are mistakes. The mistakes related to human factor, as Bogdan mentioned, it's not clear how to match the photograph of the 20-year-old against the photograph of the 35-year-old. And we have a whole bunch of fraudsters that can use falsified identity documentation, and we decided to do something about it. And we did everything on identification. Our regulator is happy. The passport is checked, but we're not 100% confident. And we don't have a peace of mind that the person is a true one, the one he's trying to act out. And for the good customers, we need to have a simplified process to ensure less engagement. For bad customers, we need to have fences, more and more fences for bad customers. And some banks required show us the foreign passport, bring your grandma, etc. And we try to understand who people are. And the same person was carrying different names in our bank, and he tried to obtain loans from us using different passports. And we started to identify this person by video, and we fought these frauds. And how to service customer? We don't have branches, and how to know who is calling? And we attached science to determine who is calling us. And then emotions. We started to investigate the emotions of the callers, and this is a rocket science. Indeed, any use of mobile phone, ATM, and any communication, we are trying to recognize the patterns, whether this pattern is compliant with what this person has shown in the past. So we are very advanced in it. And the logic is we are using identification. It's a buzzword, but it's different from authorization. Identification is one-to-one. And if such and such man has come with a name and last name, but we need to ensure 100% compliance. But authorization is less accurate, but in many aspects it's sufficient, and the benefit of it is greater for the good customers. For good customers, it makes the process simpler, and for bad customers, it makes it more complicated, forcing the bad customer to bring more and more certificates. What is important that we have these photographs that we send to the biometric identification systems. So it is related to the rendering remote services. And if you have your biometric data in the system, you can get remote services. But authorization is still important. It shall be less regulated than identification, because in identification we have so many experiments. If we keep high requirements for authorization, for processing, for storage, then we will lose lots of space for experiments. It's not just the face, it can be your voice. Biometric can be the way you write with your left hand or right hand, the way you keep your cell phone, and how are you nervous or not nervous. There are so many behavioral indicators. We call them behavioral scoring elements. There are so many of them. And if identification is so advanced, because we will combating the fraudsters, and we keep 80 million biometric data sets. Now we have only 200,000. Once we have dozens of millions of these replicas of this biometric data, and it's important not to keep just the face and the voice sample, but behavioral patterns, behavioral footprints, and they can be also used. Maybe they will become a part of the biometric system to be used as a factor for identification, which is needed. It can be broad-based. Thank you very much for myself as a regulator. This is music for my ears. And we need to establish good conditions for the good customers and make barriers for bad customers. It's a great statement. It's a great message. This is the whole point. So good customers, they have a green light, and bad customers, they have to face fences. And we need to create barriers and fences for bad customers. This is what the Bank of Russia is doing. And I believe the regulator shall not put lots of efforts from the regulatory requirements. And I agree with you, this is the bank's role. One more question that goes to Alfa-Bank. Ivan, as far as I know, Alfa-Bank took part in the experimental sandbox on implementation of video identification technology. Please share with us what are the outcomes for the Alfa-Bank in this experiment. Have you managed to automate the identification process and authentication of customers' process? And also, please tell us, what is the future for biometric data, for video identification? Where is the borderline? Maybe you can tell us. To what extent? Thank you very much for this discussion. And I'm happy that we are talking about this subject. And this subject is raised again. And if I remember it right, in the end of 2019, we had an experiment, and it was quite successful. There is no issue with the development of video identification solution. We did it for SMEs, for retail customers. It was done. But this initiative have not received the regulatory support. It was related to the fact that the state did not want to have a competitor for the one single banking system that we have in place, and also the changes that are happening in the development of the unified biometric system. For us, it's positive. Now it is developing in the area where it needs to go. We need to create a stimulus for the customers, so they're not afraid to give away their biometric data, but use it. The system was created, but the people will not prompted to use it, because we had just a few use cases, and the biggest banks did it quite well. And back then, when we started to collect biometric data in our mobile application, within 2 months, we obtained 2 million of biometric replicas, data sets, and we explained people why do they give it away, how to use it. And one of the most popular cases for us was biometric identification in the branch, and they were receiving the notifications on their cell phone that they are already in a queue, and we almost knew what is the task that this customer who just walked in the branch want to tackle. It worked really well, so the customers were happy with it, and no complaints were coming from the customers, and we never had any issues with the biometric data use. And now we are adding data to the unified banking system.
And so the system will be filled in with this biometric data. It's very important, because the cases that the colleagues are currently developing, they'll be working much better if we have more clients. We do believe in payment instruments. It will be working very well. So in our bank, 2 years ago, we stopped to use passes, and we started to let employees in through the biometric data. It took a couple of days to get accustomed to that. And so now just try to ask our employees, do you have your pass? I don't think that they do have their passes anymore, because we're now using biometric data. Biometrics simplifies our life, and so we don't see any problems with any scenarios in this respect. And at the same time, when it comes to video identification, the opportunity to become a client of a bank without coming to the bank, I do think that there is such an opportunity. We need to think about it. I guess that we've learned to just live without it. Just as Tinkoff, we have a large network of representatives that can reach up to 95% of the citizens of Russia. So the life makes us do this, and we find alternatives. It's not bad on the one hand, but on the other hand, our employee that comes to a customer doesn't only identify the customer and issues a bank card, but also does a lot of different things, like obtains consent for the use of data, also helps with the mobile application. So it's a good onboarding of a client. And so I'm not sure that we could do this remotely, even though I think it's already real. So I believe that we talk about this country. Well, Russia is large and a lot of people live in remote regions. And to enable them to actually become clients of banks that are not presented in some cities and towns, I think that's a big task, and it's a very social task. If there are the requirements of international regulators that allow us to do this, and the Russian requirements don't allow us to do this, I guess that there is some still room for development for us. And well, I guess that if this technology of remote identification works abroad, then we can also make this happen here. At the same time, AI introduces new challenges to us. Just a couple of cases from my part. I was on a vacation with my wife and got to the hotel in the evening, switched on the TV. I was on my smartphone, and also I was watching a movie about Indiana Jones. And then I felt some anxiety. And then I realized that there was a young Indiana Jones on the screen, and he was running around shooting, and I could recognize the story. And I thought, okay, I couldn't have missed this movie at all. And I realized that there was something new happening on my screen. I got online, and then I realized that the technology of artificial rejuvenation, this is a new challenges that the AI presents to us. So definitely AI should be in good hands, because when it ends up in bad hands, which can definitely happen, we can face different consequences, and we need to be ready for this. And well, today we already spoke a lot about it at the plenary session. And I also believe that for the development of unified biometric system, which we believe in, the state has to form alliances with the banks, because we can become quite significant donor of biometric data and prints, because we don't only need to collect them, but also to update them. Banks are quite good at this. The major banks learned to work with biometrics, and we can do it on a regular basis. Just give us the opportunity to use this biometrical data on good conditions, maybe for free for a couple of first years, because it will give us a boost to adapt large population of Russia to these new technologies. I guess that at this step of the development, it's very important to invest in it, to unite our efforts, and to try to work in this direction very fast together. We have everything for this. Thank you, Ivan. Well, I guess our time is almost up, despite the fact that we started a bit later. So now we will analyze the votes of our participants. And now I would like to ask all of you, because we've already outlined the plan of our actions, I would like to ask you 3 main questions. But I would like to pose the first question to you, which is the most significant for us, to address the topic of remote identification. So, from the regulator's point of view, I believe that we need to address the question of balance between financial availability and security of services that will be provided across this channel. And talking about security, I would support the words of my colleague. So when it comes to illegal use of personal data, this question should be addressed, because it will allow us to attract more clients, because they won't have this fear anymore and they'll be sure that the data will be protected. Okay, thank you, Dmitry. Well, I've already said it, but I would like to repeat once again that we need to identify whether the identification is equal to personal visit. If it is, then we can proceed from that. Okay, thank you, Vladislav. So I don't think we have any problems with either technologies or implementation. I would support this story and say that actually to have service that is demanded, we need to find a platform and to unite our efforts for a dialogue to understand whether it's needed, because then we can onboard our clients and make it more convenient for a physical entity. We should use this opportunity. And then the question is just about nuances. Thank you. Bogdan, please. Right, I support everything that was said by the colleagues. Indeed, I have two thoughts in this regard. First, I think that we should move away from the phrase to submit the biometrical data, because I guess that it has some negative connotation. It's like submitting your blood test, you know, and you just imagine that, oh, you know, it's going to be scary, etc. No, submitting biometric is for your safety and it's secure. And I think that we need to change it. I think that we need to change the perception of this concept, because this will enable citizens to get more services. At the same time, we do know that there are a lot of developments in the field of fraud, anti-fraud policies, etc. And so we can use it also for the remote identification, so that we don't have only the centralized system, which we call every time we need some confirmation, but we can actually have a unified biometric system that is filled with the external sources of information, which is validated, so that it will become a trusted source that credit organizations of a smaller size will be able to use to identify their customers in future. Thank you, Stanislav. Right, two comments from my side. So, technologically, we are ready for the biotechnologies, and I think now it's very important for us to fill it in. So, now if we talk about some frequent visits, frequent operations, now it's quite scary, but the more visits we have, the more biometric data submissions we have, the better. So now banks as services, they communicate with their clients quite often, and so we can trust their identification, and those are now working already with the fingerprints. When it comes to the revolutionary solutions, well, we have not only banks, but we also have photos and our passports, right? So all citizens have passports, and all the passports have photos. So if we get access to the photos of these passports, and maybe we can create another print so that we could fill in the biometric system not only from the bank's systems, but also from, for example, the Ministry of Interior Affairs database, because that would mean that like all the Russian citizens that got their passports, they will be added to the system, and the banks could just follow up on this and enrich this. Okay, thank you, Ivan. Right, so I don't think that I'll be very original here, so we need to continue filling the database in to add some more information and also work on the use cases. Maybe we should simplify the system. Now the unified biometric system is filled in with a large number of fingerprints, but only part of them can be used for the remote identification, because there are high requirements for this task. So for a higher adaptation, I guess that we could decrease the requirements somehow, while we are still working the system of collection and update of the biometric data. Okay, thank you. I would also like to add, just very shortly, So colleagues already mentioned it. So my colleague from Tinkoff and my colleague from Alfa, they represent the major suppliers of data. I didn't focus on that, but the number of biometric samples is estimated in millions. And we do support the colleagues in saying that the most important, on top of onboarding of a client, is to support this client. And so the next year will be the most important for us, probably, with the support of the regulator and the Bank of Russia. So we would like to provide for the seamless adaptation of this data. And colleagues stated absolutely rightfully that when we can open an account with the help of identification, our task is to organize it in such a way that once you go and undergo the identification once in life, and then you get the seamless process of onboarding. And that's why we need to get the levels of biometrics and different use cases. So we discussed it a lot already.
We are the best, right? Maybe there are other companies that also can offer data. We have one common goal. We are working for the common goal. No one wants to finalize the discussion. They still are very much into the discussion. Please show us the results of our voting. Remote video identification via mobile banking application wins. So we have finance profession people here. They understand there is a risk in terms of use of this data, but still they vote for the comfort of using their cell phones for the identification. Now we want to thank all the participants of this voting process, and I'm thankful to our distinguished speakers. I believe we had a useful dialogue. It's not so much a discussion. In the beginning, I offered a discussion, and probably you were set for this discussion, but this was a dialogue, in fact. We are looking into the same direction, and we are like-minded. We understand that we need to do it. We need to promote digitalization of our services, and offering a comfortable service such remote identification, the more so. We already gained experience, and we have a really useful tool, if we can call it so, which is unified biometric system. We have a database. What is left for us is to decide how do we move forward without making unnecessary risks, both for the banks as well as for the customers. And I can fully agree with Herman Yurevich. It's important, while you promote any type of innovation, keep this balance. We need to keep everything in a balance, and I'm really thankful for your participation.